I had always dreamed of owning my own barbecue restaurant. After years of planning, late-night recipe testing, and saving every penny, I finally opened Smoking Glory in a bustling neighborhood known for its food lovers. The smell of hickory smoke, sizzling ribs, and tangy sauce quickly drew in locals. Families, foodies, and even tourists couldn't get enough. Business was booming, and for a while, everything felt perfect. But paradise came with an unexpected threat: the local HOA. At first, it seemed harmless. They sent letters about parking rules, noise levels, and landscaping. I thought it was just standard bureaucracy, nothing I couldn't handle. I even made minor adjustments, trimmed hedges, and ensured deliveries didn't block neighbors' driveways. Then came the first shock. One Friday afternoon, while we were packed with customers, I noticed flashing lights outside. HOA representatives weren't just sending letters anymore, they had called the police. Officers arrived and demanded we shut down immediately, claiming violations that, frankly, didn't exist. My staff and I were stunned. The dining room fell silent. Customers whispered in confusion as I tried to explain that we had all permits, health inspections, and approvals in order. The HOA claimed my outdoor seating was illegal, and my music, disturbing the peace, even though dozens of nearby businesses played louder music daily without issue. It felt personal. I realized this wasn't about rules, it was about control. They wanted to push me out. I refused to close. I told the officers politely that I was fully compliant with all regulations, but the HOA representatives glared at me as if I had committed a crime. Over the next few weeks, their tactics escalated. Threatening letters arrived daily. They implied that if I didn't comply, fines and lawsuits would follow. One particularly nasty letter even hinted at criminal charges if I continued operating. I felt trapped. Running a restaurant was hard enough without having a powerful HOA breathing down my neck and trying to crush my business. I knew I couldn't give in. I began documenting everything: photos of my property, copies of permits, recordings of interactions with HOA representatives, and even witness statements from loyal customers. Every unfair demand, every baseless threat, they were all evidence. That's when I decided it was time to fight back. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in property rights and business law. We reviewed the HOA's claims and quickly realized just how overreaching and unlawful their actions were. Not only were they threatening me without cause, but their harassment was clearly intended to intimidate and coerce me into shutting down. With legal guidance, I drafted a formal complaint. The message was clear: I wouldn't be bullied out of my livelihood. The battle was just beginning, but I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't going down without a fight. After filing my formal complaint, I thought the harassment might ease up. I was wrong. The HOA wasn't done, they doubled down. One evening, as I was closing the restaurant, I noticed a car idling across the street. It wasn't a customer. It was one of the HOA board members, staring at the building like a hawk. The next day, I received a new letter, but this one wasn't just passive-aggressive. It was a direct threat: continue to operate illegally, and we will take every measure to shut you down. You have been warned. I couldn't believe it. Illegal. My permits were in perfect order. Every inspection had passed. Yet, here they were, trying to intimidate me. Then things got personal. I started receiving phone calls at odd hours, anonymous, menacing, and full of veiled threats. One caller even suggested that operating my business could lead to serious consequences if I didn't comply with the HOA's demands. I was angry but also scared. My family, my staff, and my customers were all affected. I knew I had to stay calm and stay strategic. My lawyer and I began building a rock-solid case, not just for the threats, but for the harassment itself. We documented everything: letters, emails, phone calls, even photos of suspicious cars lingering near the restaurant. Every interaction the HOA tried to use as pressure became evidence against them. Meanwhile, business continued. I refused to let fear drive me out. Word of mouth actually helped. Customers were sympathetic, supporting us more than ever. It was almost ironic. The HOA's bullying was fueling our growth. Then came the day that truly proved their desperation. An HOA representative appeared in the parking lot, this time trying to block deliveries and customer access. They were physically trying to shut down my business. I calmly called the police, not because I feared arrest, but because I needed witnesses for the harassment. The officers arrived, observed the situation, and quickly confirmed that there was no legal reason to block my business. The HOA members were forced to back off, but their frustration was palpable. That's when I realized the bigger picture. This wasn't about rules or regulations. It was about power, control, and entitlement. The HOA had assumed that being in charge meant they could threaten, intimidate, and bully anyone who didn't bow to them. But I wasn't going to bow. We prepared for the next step, filing a lawsuit. It wasn't just about protecting my barbecue restaurant anymore. It was about standing up to harassment, defending my rights as a property owner, and sending a message that entitlement and intimidation don't win. By the time the legal documents were served, the HOA realized they had miscalculated. Their threats were no longer scary, they were evidence. And I was ready to take them down. With the lawsuit officially filed, the real battle began. The HOA thought sending threats and harassing me would intimidate a small business owner. They had no idea I was ready to fight, not just for my restaurant, but for justice. Court day arrived, and I'll admit, I was nervous. Sitting in the courtroom, I saw the HOA representatives smugly talking among themselves, probably convinced their intimidation tactics would carry the day. But I had something far stronger than smirks: evidence. We presented every piece of documentation meticulously. Every threatening letter, every call at odd hours, every baseless attempt to shut down the restaurant, laid out in front of the judge. My lawyer spoke clearly, calmly, and forcefully. "This is not a dispute about rules," he said. "This is a case about harassment, intimidation, and abuse of power by an HOA against a law-abiding business owner." The judge listened. And slowly, the tide began to turn. The HOA tried to argue that they were enforcing rules, but we had already proven that my business was in full compliance. Every violation, they had claimed, was either fabricated or misinterpreted. The judge asked questions, challenged their evidence, and even raised eyebrows at their aggressive tactics. Meanwhile, I sat quietly, watching as the reality sank in. Their entitlement was being exposed in full view. The same letters and threats that had made me anxious were now their undoing. Every attempt to scare me was now evidence of harassment. During testimony, some of the HOA members seemed flustered. Their carefully rehearsed lines fell apart under questioning. One board member tried to justify a threat as standard procedure, but the judge didn't buy it. Another insisted my outdoor seating was illegal, forgetting that a city inspector had signed off weeks earlier. Each misstep piled onto the last, like dominoes toppling. Outside the courtroom, my loyal customers and staff waited nervously, offering words of encouragement. It was humbling. I realized that this wasn't just my fight. It was a fight for anyone who had ever been bullied or threatened by people who assume power gives them the right to intimidate. Weeks went by, with hearings, motions, and counterarguments. The HOA tried every trick in the book: delaying tactics, vague accusations, even attempting to discredit me personally. But nothing worked. Each time, our evidence stood firm, exposing the full extent of their harassment. Finally, the day of judgment arrived. The courtroom was tense, the air thick with anticipation. The judge reviewed the case and, after careful consideration, ruled decisively in my favor. Not only did the HOA's harassment stop immediately, but the court also awarded damages for the stress, threats, and interference with my business. The reactions were priceless. The HOA members looked stunned, speechless, even. Their smugness had vanished, replaced by a dawning realization: entitlement and bullying don't win in court. Justice does. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt a mix of relief, triumph, and vindication. My restaurant was safe. My reputation intact. And most importantly, I had shown that standing up to intimidation isn't just possible, it's necessary. The battle had been long and stressful, but it was worth every ounce of effort. I had defended my dream, protected my family, and sent a message that no one, no matter how powerful they think they are, can threaten their way into victory. When the gavel fell and the judge ruled in my favor, I felt a wave of relief crash over me. Months of harassment, intimidation, and endless legal wrangling were finally behind me. But as much as this felt like a personal victory, I knew it was bigger than me. It was about sending a message. The HOA, which once strutted around like a small kingdom of entitled rulers, had been humbled in court. They weren't just ordered to stop harassing me, they were forced to pay damages, reimburse my legal fees, and issue a formal statement acknowledging their overreach. For people who had spent months threatening me, that was the ultimate defeat. But victory isn't just about winning in court, it's about what happens afterward. And oh, did things change? Life after the courtroom. Word spread fast in the community. Customers who had once nervously asked if the restaurant was going to be shut down now came in with big smiles and congratulatory handshakes. Business boomed even more. Families came in, not just for the smoked brisket and ribs, but to support a business that had stood its ground against bullying. My staff, who had stood beside me through every threat and every tense night, felt a new sense of pride. "We did it," one of my cooks said, tears in his eyes. "They tried to crush us, and now look, we're stronger than ever." Even people who had never eaten at my place before came just because they heard the story. I'd have customers saying, "We came to try the food of the guy who beat the HOA." It became almost legendary, a David versus Goliath story, but with barbecue sauce and smoke. The HOA fallout. As for the HOA, they weren't the same after the trial. Their reputation was shattered. Residents who had once been scared to speak up against them now realized the truth: their power wasn't absolute. Several board members resigned under pressure. Others tried to cling to power, but their credibility was gone. People stopped listening to their warnings and rules, and in time, the HOA was restructured completely. The very people who tried to take me down ended up losing the authority they abused. Ironically, a few of those same residents who once glared at me in disapproval started coming into the restaurant too. Some even apologized privately, saying they had been pressured by the board to support the harassment. I didn't hold grudges. I told them, grab a plate and eat. We move forward. Personal lessons learned. For me, this whole ordeal was more than just a legal battle. It taught me about resilience, patience, and the importance of standing up for yourself. There were nights when I thought about giving in, shutting down, and finding an easier path. But every time I looked at my restaurant, the place I built with my own hands, I knew I couldn't surrender. Running a barbecue joint was my dream, my passion. And no HOA, no matter how entitled or aggressive, was going to take that away from me. I also learned that documentation is power. Every email I saved, every letter I filed away, every phone call I noted, it all mattered. Without those records, it would have been my word against theirs. With them, it was truth against lies. Community strength. One of the most beautiful things to come out of this fight was the support of the community. I wasn't alone. Customers, neighbors, even strangers stood behind me. When the court ruling came out, people celebrated with me like it was their victory too. We even threw a Freedom Barbecue Bash weekend. Live music, discounted meals, and a giant banner that read, "Justice served hot." The turnout was massive. People lined up down the block, not just for ribs and brisket, but for the celebration of standing up to bullies. And I'll never forget a customer who walked up to me that day, plate in hand, and said, "You didn't just win for yourself. You won for all of us who've ever been pushed around." That hit me hard. He was right. The HOA's last attempt. Of course, entitlement doesn't die quietly. A few months later, one of the stubborn HOA members tried to stir up trouble again. They filed a complaint about smoke pollution from my smokers. But by then, the city knew the game. Inspectors came, confirmed everything was within regulations, and closed the case within days. That was the moment I truly knew they had lost all their power. Their threats had become empty. Their words carried no weight. They were just noise in the background while I kept serving customers. Full circle. Today, my restaurant is thriving more than ever. We've expanded the patio, hired more staff, and even started catering events. The HOA saga is now just a story I tell when customers ask why there's a framed copy of the court judgment hanging proudly on the wall near the entrance. And every time I look at it, I smile, not out of spite, but out of pride. Pride that I stood up, fought back, and won. Because here's the truth, entitlement and intimidation only work if you let them. The moment you push back, with evidence, with courage, and with persistence, they crumble. My barbecue restaurant didn't just survive the HOA's attacks, it thrived because of them. And that's the sweetest victory of all. So the next time someone tells me I can't do something, I'll just smile, fire up the smoker, and let the scent of hickory and victory drift through the air. Because if there's one thing this journey taught me, it's this. You can threaten me, you can try to scare me, but you'll never take away what I've worked for. Justice tastes even better when it's served with barbecue.